Hey guys, it's Jed, aka Snow, the rogue behind ClassicRogueCraft.com. So I just wanted to bring you guys a video today about the double active trinket strategy. So this is a new strategy. It's coming in mostly for Phase 5. We're seeing it come into being for the first time, mostly because until now we haven't really had two really strong trinkets. So before we had Renetakis, which was a lot of what a lot of rogues were using, but now we have Earthstrike trinket, which is really good as well. So now with two really strong active trinkets, there's a strategy involving using both on one single fight, and I wanted to talk to you guys about when you should use that, when you shouldn't use it, who should be using two active trinkets, who shouldn't be using it, and yeah, we're basically going to cover the ins and outs and why this strategy is really strong, especially for rogues without a DFT. So let's get into it. Oh, and one more thing, I just want to say thanks to everyone who has supported, liked, subscribed, and came and said hi on Twitch, basically. I never would have imagined that I got partnered within a month of streaming, essentially, and then got 1,000 subs shortly after on Twitch, and now we're almost up to 10,000 subs on YouTube. I am working on the 1,000 subscriber special video. It's still work in progress, but I hope you guys will like it when I release it. But just want to say a quick thanks, and thanks for the support, everyone. I really appreciate it. Alright, so let's get into the double active trinket guide. So how does this work? Basically, you have two really strong active trinkets now. Every rogue can get them. They are the Earthstrike and the Renataki's Charm of Trickery. Now, these are two very strong active trinkets. A lot of rogues already had Renataki's Charm of Trickery coming into Phase 5, and now we're picking up Earthstrike. Obviously, Earthstrike, for those of you that didn't farm faction, it's going to take a little while to get it, but it's still an easy-ish to get trinket. It's just very annoying or time consuming to get, but as far as difficulty to get it, it's not actually hard. You don't need a raid to go pick this up. So let's break down this new meta that's kind of evolving now, where suddenly we have two really strong active trinkets that you can use together in some situations. Alright, so how do you use two active trinkets together? Well, first things first is you can't actually use them both at the exact same time, because active trinkets usually share a shared cooldown. So you can see here in the Feyenzi fight, he's going to come up, and you can see down here in the corner, he's going to use his active trinkets. And when he uses one of the active trinkets, it puts both on cooldown. So you can see he popped one trinket and it put a 2-minute cooldown on the trinket he used, which is the Earthstrike trinket. So that's the normal cooldown, but it also put his Renataki's trinket on a 20-second cooldown. So this is what we mean by shared cooldown. You can't usually use two active trinkets at the same time. Now, if we fast forward here, we can see he's going to use his other trinket. Now, it does say 19 seconds in the corner here on his trinket. That's just a UI bug. It's off cooldown now. You can see here, he uses his second active trinket in the fight. So he uses his Renataki's trinket, and then he swapped over again. So this is what we mean by using two active trinkets in one fight. He's able to rotate and alternate the usage of these two trinkets. Okay, now let's go over some basic rules for if you're going to be doing this trinket technique, or you're going to be using these double active trinkets. So tip one, and this is fairly obvious, but we should cover it anyway just in case someone doesn't know about this, is that obviously the fight has to be long enough to use both trinkets. Like for example, this Razorgore kill, this is one of my old videos. You guys may have remembered this old guide that I did on Razorgore. Razorgore dies so quick here, right, that if we used one active trinket and it goes on cooldown, we're not going to get to use the second active trinket, right? Razorgore is just going to die before the cooldown ends. So obviously you need the fight to be long enough that you actually get to use both active trinkets in the fight. Okay, so tip 2 though is a fairly interesting one, which is the Renataki's trinket itself. If you use it first, triggers a lower shared cooldown. So we saw here in this Twin M's fight, when Feyenzi uses his Earthstrike trinket, it puts both trinkets on a 20-second cooldown, right? Or rather, it puts the other trinket that he hasn't used on a 20-second cooldown. But if he actually swaps the order here, and this is something not every rogue knows, but you can actually pop the Renataki's first, and the Renataki's will only force a 10-second cooldown on the Earthstrike. So because Renataki's doesn't have a duration, the reason why Blizzard has implemented these shared cooldowns is to try to stop you from doubling up on active trinkets. So they don't want you to pop your Earthstrike and then be able to use Renataki's during the Earthstrike duration. So this is kind of a measure that Blizzard put in place, but because the Renataki's trinket itself doesn't have an effect or buff on you, there's a lower shared cooldown. So this is just one little tip I can add if you're going to do this Earthstrike Renataki combo, or you're going to use Renatakis in any double trinket combo, is if you pop Renatakis first, you'll actually trigger only a 10-second shared cooldown onto the second trinket. So you actually be able to use that second trinket a little bit earlier. Now, when might this be handy? So it's usually not a super big deal. So for example, on Twin Amps, it's not a big deal if he uses Earthstrike first or Renatakis first in that situation, because he's going to get to use both. But there's going to be some situations where you might want to use Renatakis first to take advantage of that. So for example, here on the Satura fight, you could go in for the cleave damage by using your Renatakis, and then follow it up by popping all your cooldowns together with the Earthstrike trinket after. So because cleave damage scales energy really well, that extra energy from your Renatakis is going to go into your cleave, and it's going to have a better effect there for you. And as well as that, there's other situations, such as if you're a dagger rogue, you might want that Renatakis first to smooth out your early rotation, so that you get a nice slice and dice up and get everything prepped really nice and easily, and then you pop your Earthstrike after that with your Adrenaline Rush and Blade Flurry. So while it's not every single boss that it's going to matter whether you pop Earthstrike or Renatakis first, there are going to be some fights like Satura here where it might actually be beneficial for you to take advantage of that and pop your Renatakis trinket first. So you can see in this clip here, Fiyenzi uses his Renatakis first, and look, Earthstrike only goes on a 10-second cooldown, which does allow him to actually use Earthstrike during the Satura fight as well, and use the double active trinket. Okay, so let's talk about when to not use the double active trinkets in phase 5. So when you have a DFT, okay, so if you have a DFT, you will generally not want to be using Renatakis plus Earthstrike duo together in most fights, unless it's a very short fight. And even then, I would still generally suggest that you rotate your active trinkets with the DFT in one slot. So for example, you could go DFT Renatakis in one fight, then you could rotate it in the next fight to DFT Earthstrike right after. So what you're basically doing is you're going to keep constantly swapping your active trinkets between each fight when one goes on cooldown, and this is typically going to be your most effective way to use multiple active trinkets with your DFT. Now of course there are again exceptions like the Satura fight that we just talked about and mentioned, where a double active could be handy there because the Renataki could potentially outperform a DFT, just because that extra energy during the cleave where you get an extra attack essentially from the energy is very efficient. But in general, you do want to keep your DFT in one slot and then just rotate the active trinket in your other slot. Now again, another example of an exception to where you might not want to use a DFT with active trinket, and you might want to go to double active even if you have a DFT, is the Twin Amps fight, because you're running around. Look at all this wasted time, and because you're running around from bus to bus, you're not having full uptime on the passive trinkets. So you're not getting the full value of a passive trinket on the Twin Amps fight. So this is one of those fights that potentially the double active trinket meta could be stronger than even just having a DFT in one slot and an active in another slot. Okay, so outside of these exceptions, who should be using the double active trinkets in general? Well, if you don't have a DFT, so this is fairly straightforward. If you don't have a DFT, then double active trinkets from this phase onwards can be really strong for you. So if you watched my last AQ40 early look video with Fiyenzi from Progress, he's the Progress class lead for Rogues, and he's been using that trinket setup for himself. So he doesn't have a DFT yet, so he's been using the Earthstrike Renataki combo, and it's been doing very well for himself. I think he got a rank 1 pass on Uro at the time when he got that pass. So if you do not have a DFT, I would generally recommend that you go for double active trinket for practically every fight that is long enough for you to use both trinkets if you don't have a DFT yet. Now there is a breakpoint for Earthstrike plus Renatakis versus one active trinkets plus Blackened's Breath or Hodge, but it's very high. So it's almost reaching like that 2-minute mark, or sometimes even reaching that 2-minute marks in some cases when I was simming things and testing things out. So you basically have to hit that 2-minute mark, but if the fight goes on long enough, your first trinket is going to come back off cooldown, and you're going to end up getting a second use of your active trinket, right? So if your Earthstrike goes on cooldown, but your fight goes on long enough for the Earthstrike to come off cooldown, and you get a second use of the Earthstrike, it's going to put it in favor of the double active trinket again over something like a Blackened's Breath or Hodge. So that's why in general I would recommend, if you do not have a DFT yet, it's probably the best trinket combo you can go for, which is Earthstrike Renetakis, or obviously if you have a Jump Gaba, you can swap that in instead of a Renetakis, for example. Okay, so now let's talk sim data, because I know some people will want this. When does 2 active trinkets beat 1 active plus a passive trinket in a single fight? So this is, in particular, we're going to be talking about DFT. Because I said if you don't have a DFT, I generally recommend that you actually just use Earthstrike Renetakis all the time, because you don't have a DFT yet. You don't have a really strong passive trinket to be using. Now, I'm not going to talk about Badge of the Swarmguard in this video, because it's kind of its own deal. It's got some unique things to the usage of Badge of the Swarmguard. Now, again, if you have a DFT, I'd still generally recommend you stick to rotating 1 active trinket. Most of the time is going to be the general best way for you to be efficient with your trinket usage, is to just finish 1 fight with 1 active, swap in the next active, and keep rotating trinkets that way. But if you want to see the breakpoints, here they are. So if you have a DFT plus an Earthstrike versus an Earthstrike plus a Renetaki, for an ally Sword Rogue, you want the fight to be 55 to 60 seconds. So once it reaches 55 to 60 seconds, that's when your double active combo starts losing to a DFT plus an Earthstrike. Now, as an ally Dagger Rogue, it's 70 to 75 seconds. As a Horde Sword Rogue, you reach 45 to 50 seconds, and as a Horde Dagger Rogue, it's 60 to 65 seconds, roughly. So when you get beyond these times, basically that's when your double active trinket starts losing to an Earthstrike and a DFT for a single fight. Now, if we're talking Jom Gaba, if you have a DFT plus a Jom Gaba, again, here are the timings. It's roughly about 60 seconds, give or take 5 seconds. So around that 60-second mark is roughly when a Jom Gaba plus Earthstrike starts losing to a DFT plus a Jom Gaba. So as long as it's faster than that, you can potentially use a double active trinkets. But that said, again, I will say that if you do have a DFT, I would generally recommend you stick to just rotating 1 active trinkets. It's going to be more efficient in general. And this sort of double active trinket is more of if you have a really fast fight and you want to cheese that fight with 2 actives, then you can kind of consider doing this. But again, it has to be a very specific timing window, right? So we look again at the Earthstrike plus Renetaki. So if the fight is long enough for you to use 2 trinkets, but shorter than basically these breakpoints, that's when you can potentially look at cheesing with a double active combo. But again, DFT plus 1 active is just going to be the gold standard. It's going to be more consistent. I would generally recommend you just stick with that if you have a DFT. Alright, so that's basically the double active trinket meta. It's super strong. So again, as soon as you get these 2 trinkets, the Earthstrike plus the Renetakis, I would recommend you use them both if you don't have a DFT yet. It's a very strong combination for rogues that do not have a DFT right now. And it only performs a little bit worse than having a DFT and an Earthstrike, for example. Alright guys, so I hope this video helped you out with this new double trinket meta that's coming in to play. If you have any questions or you just want to say hi, I stream every 2-ish days on twitch.tv/snowme, or you can drop by my Discord as well, where I'm always in there answering questions and doing some theory crafting with the other rogues. So take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.